Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something that might feel, well, pretty basic: active reading and taking good notes. Specifically, how you actually mark up a text.
That's right. And we've got a bunch of sources here, research papers, strategy guides, looking at these skills that are really fundamental, especially when the reading gets tough.
So, our mission today is to unpack all that, figure out what works, why these things are so crucial, and, find some practical takeaways you can use pretty much straight away to maybe improve how you read and take notes.
And I think the core idea, really, that comes through from the material is interesting. It's this sense that, look, you've been reading and writing for years, right? You probably feel okay about it,
Here, yeah, competent.
but then you hit college, or maybe a demanding job, or just trying to understand complex stuff online, and the demands are just different. They push you.
So the idea is that even if you think you're good, being open to refining your approach, sort of looking at how you do it, that's really key to growth.
Exactly. It's about being willing to learn how to learn, even for these basic skills.
Okay, let's dive in then. Why is this active reading and note-taking combo so important? And why might we need to rethink how we approach it?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Being efficient and effective at reading and taking notes that actually help you later, it's presented as just absolutely critical. For academic success, sure, but really for processing any kind of significant information load.
Right. But the challenge, like you hinted, is that most people just assume they're fine. I can read, I can write. What's the big deal?
Precisely. That feeling of, I understand the words, therefore I'm reading effectively. But the point made in the material is that higher level tasks demand a deeper kind of intellectual engagement. It's more than just decoding words.
Okay, so getting these skills really sharp, making sure they're fit for the purpose you need them for, that's where the value is.
Yeah. And the sources do acknowledge, there's tons of advice out there. These strategies we'll talk about are just a good starting point, a solid framework, not necessarily the only way.
Gotcha. And this word active keeps coming up. Active learning, active reading. What does active learning actually mean here?
So active learning, fundamentally, is about shifting your focus. It's not just about the information you're taking in, but also consciously thinking about the how. How am I learning this?
Ah, okay. Like being aware of your own process.
Exactly. Reflecting on it, spotting weaknesses, strengths, asking for feedback. Essentially aiming to become a better learner. It's metacognition.
Learning about learning makes sense. So how does that apply to reading?
It's the same idea.
Mm.
Active reading means applying that same approach to the act of reading. You're not just letting the words wash over you. You're actively thinking about how you're engaging with this text. How can I read this more efficiently, more effectively?
So you're reading the text, but also kind of observing yourself reading it at the same time.
Spot on, which
Yeah.
is totally different from what the sources call passive reading.
Tell us about passive reading. What does that look like?
Passive reading is, well, it's probably the default for many of us much of the time. You pick something up, start at word one, sentence one, paragraph one, and just keep going until you hit the end.
Just plow through it.
Yeah. The source material uses this great analogy, reading everything like it's a children's storybook.
Yeah.
From once upon a time, straight through to the end.
Ah, yeah, that clicks. You can immediately see why that wouldn't work for, say, a complex academic article or a dense report where information isn't all equally important.
Exactly. That linear once upon a time approach just isn't going to cut it for the kind of demanding material you often face.
Okay, so if passive isn't enough, how do we activate our reading? The material offered some practical strategies, right? Simple ways to get more engaged.
Yes, definitely. 6 key ideas came up as ways to become a more engaged and ultimately more efficient and effective reader.
Let's hear them. What's the first one?
First, before you even read a single word, you need to distinguish the type of reading you're about to do.
Okay, so recognize that different texts need different approaches.
Precisely. You wouldn't read, say, a novel for pleasure the same way you'd read a biology textbook for an exam or a primary historical source for a research paper.
Right. Like a novel, maybe you just start at page one, but a textbook, maybe you look at the chapter summary first, or the questions at the end, or skim the headings.
Exactly. Thinking about the text type before you begin helps you choose the right strategy.
Mm.
So that's number one. Number two is asking yourself why you are reading this specific text. What's the purpose?
Ah, the goal. Is it for an exam? Writing a paper? Is it optional reading? Just general interest.
Yep. Knowing your objective really shapes what you look for, how deep you need to go, what you need to pull out of it. It guides your focus.
Simple, but probably overlooked quite often. What's number three?
Number 3 is thinking about where and when you're reading. This sounds a bit basic, maybe, but it's about honest self-assessment.
Assessing your environment and energy.
Yeah, like if you block out an hour for reading, but you only really get, say, 20 minutes of actual focused reading done, why? Was it the location, time of day? Were you tired, distracted?
Hmm. It's easy to blame the difficult text, but sometimes it's the context, the situation you're reading in.
That's the idea. Okay, number 4, and this one is presented as really powerful, especially for tricky material. Prepare your reading.
Prepare. How do you prepare to read something?
Well, if you know you're about to tackle something really dense or complex, the source uses the example of trying to read Nietzsche's On Truth and Lies cold.
Oof. Yeah, that sounds daunting.
Right. So preparation means doing a little bit of groundwork first. Maybe a quick online search for a summary or some background context, maybe asking the instructor about the key takeaways beforehand, or even just chatting with a classmate who might know something about it.
So getting your bearings before you dive in.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize this doesn't have to be a huge time sink. Just a little prep can massively boost your comprehension and how much you remember later.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Get a foothold first. What's strategy number 5?
Number 5 happens after you finish reading. Take just a couple of minutes, maybe 2 or 3, the source suggests, to articulate the big idea.
Summarize it for yourself.
Basically, yeah. What was the main point? The central concept. Why do you think this particular reading was assigned? What was its significance?
Ah, so it cements it in your mind, stops it from just fading away.
Right. It aids comprehension, boosts retention. It makes reading less of a single event and more of a process. Pre-reading, reading, and then this crucial reviewing step.
The source mentioned alternatives too, right? Like talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking to a classmate, comparing notes, or even better, try explaining the main ideas to someone who hasn't read it. That's a fantastic test of your own understanding.
Oh yeah, the teach it to learn it method. Always effective. Okay, what's the 6th strategy?
The 6th one is to develop test questions. Try to think like the instructor or whoever assigned the reading.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. What questions might they ask about this material on a quiz or an exam? The source even suggests doing this with a friend in the same class. You each write questions, then swap, answer them, maybe even grade each other's answers.
That's clever. It's like a practice test before the real thing, testing your recall and understanding under a bit of pressure.
It's a great way to check your comprehension before you get into the actual exam situation.
Okay, those 6 strategies seem really practical. Now, the sources also mention that common list of like 6 verbs for active reading, visualize, clarify, things like that. How did the material frame those for, say, a college student?
Right, that's a common framework. Visualize, clarify, question, predict, connect, evaluate. The sources sort of contextualize them for more academic work.
How so?
So visualize wasn't just about picturing scenes, but more about connecting ideas cognitively, like visualizing the structure of an argument or how different concepts relate to each other.
A more abstract visualization.
Exactly. Clarify was tied directly to annotating your text. The advice was always have a pen or pencil ready, but also clarifying the purpose of the reading. Asking why this was assigned helps you clarify its meaning within the course.
Interesting. So not just clarifying tricky words, but clarifying its whole reason for being there?
Predict was reframed as anticipate, specifically anticipating those exam questions we just talked about.
Gotcha.
Connect was about actively linking this reading to other readings or lectures in the course. Seeing the web of ideas. These connections often spark great essay topics.
Right, seeing how it fits into the bigger picture.
And evaluate was framed as thinking about how you could use this reading as evidence. How could it support an argument you might make in a paper or a discussion?
Okay, so it's taking those general verbs and applying them quite specifically to academic tasks.
Yeah. But again, the material stresses, these are just helpful prompts. If you have your own way of engaging that works for you and you're getting good results, definitely stick with it.
Okay, so we've talked about the process of reading actively. What about the actual physical act of marking up the text? Annotation.
Yes, this is where the sources get really practical about the how-to. They outline 3 main reasons why marking your text as you read is so valuable.
What are they?
First, it helps you distinguish information, sorting out what's really important versus what's secondary, what needs careful study versus what you can perhaps skim later.
Separating the wheat from the chaff, basically.
Exactly. Second, your markings create a guide for your future self, like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. When you come back to study, you've already signposted the key parts and maybe left notes. makes review much faster.
A reading trail for your future self. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good phrase. And third, marking helps make really complex or just plain lots of information feel more manageable. By actively marking and engaging, you're breaking it down as you go.
Okay, so it helps you process it initially and find it again later. Now, the standard ways are underlining and highlighting, right?
Right.
What did the sources say about those?
They definitely acknowledge how common those are. I mean, we all did it in school. But they problematize them, as the source puts it. They raise some real concerns about how effective they are for complex, college-level material.
Concerns? What's wrong with a good old highlighter?
Well, several things. A big one is that highlighting and underlining tend to create a simple binary.
Hmm.
This is important. This isn't black and white.
Okay.
But complex texts often have nuances, different levels of importance, different kinds of significance. A simple on-off system isn't really sophisticated enough for that.
It's too blunt an instrument.
Right. Plus, think about it, highlighting can actually be pretty time-consuming if you're coloring in whole paragraphs. And if the text is really dense and you end up highlighting almost everything, well, then nothing stands out anymore, does it?
Oh, I've definitely seen books like that. Just a sea of yellow or pink. Utterly useless for review.
Exactly. And maybe the most crucial critique is that just dragging a highlighter across a sentence doesn't necessarily require much deep thought. It can become quite passive. Your note-taking system, the source argues, should encourage, even force, you to think critically as you mark.
So it should be an active thinking process, not just coloring.
Yes. And finally, and this is a key point they make, underlining and highlighting don't show the relative importance of the different things you've marked.
Ah, right. So you end up with a page of highlighted bits, but you have no idea which highlighted bit is, like the absolute core concept versus something that was just mildly interesting.
Precisely. You lose that sense of hierarchy,
Yeah.
which is exactly what the proposed alternative system tries to address.
Okay, so let's hear about this alternative. The source called it the 1, 2, 3 scoring system.
Yeah, or just a dash system. It's presented as a more flexible, more informative way to mark. Instead of coloring, you use simple marks, like dashes, in the margin next to the text.
Dashes. How does that work? What do they mean?
It's tiered. So one dash next to a passage means something like, okay, this is interesting. Could be useful for an essay, maybe. Something to remember.
Interesting, but maybe not essential.
Right. Then 2 dashes means, this is important. I definitely need to learn and understand this material. This is probably where most of your marks would fall.
Okay, they lead to no stuff.
And 3 dashes signifies. This is a key concept, a central idea, absolutely fundamental. This is the stuff you need to know inside out, be able to explain without even looking at your notes.
Wow, okay, that's a very clear hierarchy. 1, 2, 3 dashes.
And the source even mentions some people use an optional 4th dash for anything the instructor explicitly says, like this specific point will be on the exam.
Right, like a super priority flag. What are the benefits of doing it this way, according to the sources?
Several big ones. First, it immediately tells you the relative importance of different pieces of information. You get that visual signal straight away.
So when you go back to study, exactly, it saves a ton of time during review. You just scan the margins, focus on the 3-dash stuff first, then the 2-dash stuff. It instantly guides your study efforts.
Guides your review. Makes sense. What else?
It's also really flexible. If you mark something with 3 dashes, but then later, maybe after finishing the chapter or hearing a lecture, you realize it wasn't quite that crucial, maybe it's just a 2-dash idea.
Yeah.
It's easy to change. You just cross out a dash or add one. Much harder to unhighlight something.
True. You can't easily downgrade a highlighted passage.
Right. And you can easily write little notes or keywords in the margin right next to your dashes, linking the mark to a quick thought. Plus, practically speaking, it doesn't smudge like highlighters can. And it works fine on double-sided printouts where highlighter might bleed through.
Okay, that dash system does sound genuinely practical and like an upgrade from just highlighting everything. Any other quick tips on marking text from the sources?
Yeah, just a couple of final points.
Yeah.
First, they strongly advise against using used textbooks that are already heavily marked up by someone else.
Oh, right, because you don't know their system or what they thought was important for their class.
Exactly. Their markings could be totally irrelevant or even misleading for your needs. It can actually be really confusing.
Good point. Don't inherit someone else's potentially flawed notes.
And second, just a reminder that whatever system you use, it's supposed to help you, not become a burden. It should add maybe seconds or a few minutes to your reading time, not hours. If your system is making reading take dramatically longer, it's not efficient, and you need to adjust it.
Keep it functional.
Yeah. And Tying back to what we said earlier, if you already have a different system that works great for you, gets you the grades or the understanding you need, stick with it. The goal is effective learning, not just following one specific method described here.
This has been really useful. It feels like putting these ideas together, that intentional approach of active reading, plus using a smart system like those dashes to show relative importance, really tackles that challenge of dealing with complex information without getting overwhelmed.
Absolutely. It makes your engagement more purposeful, more targeted. It helps you build understanding and memory more durably, hopefully without feeling like you're just drowning in text.
So the big takeaway seems to be that really effective reading and note-taking aren't automatic skills. They're things you can consciously work on and improve. It's about being intentional, how you read, how you mark, how you review.
It really is about shifting from just passive consumption to truly active engagement with the material, active learning in action.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We talked about using a system like the dashes to distinguish relative importance in texts. How might applying that same principle, consciously sorting information by importance, change how you handle information overload in other parts of your life? Could it help with emails, project notes, even just processing the news?
Something to think about.
Definitely. Well, thanks for digging deep with us today on reading and note-taking.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.